better than nothing.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Squat Cobbler. This is our 20-second squat. I'm Kelly Toole at KELLYTHUL on Twitter.
And I am Mike at Official Pagan on just about everything. You just said it was our 20-second squat. How long has it taken us to get here? Like, how many months? Because I feel like if I was doing actual squats, this is how long it would take me to get to 22.
I think the timing would be very close for me as well. Gosh, I think we're good. This will be embarrassing for me to do a guess and then find out later, but I'm going to say we've been doing 3 months worth of squatting.
That sounds about right. In 3 months, I feel like if I did this for 3 months, I could do 22 squats.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
I don't mean at a time. I mean spread out over the course of 3 months.
Pace yourself. Yeah. You know, you feel the burn better that way, I think. But,
right. It's all about form.
And speaking of form, we're returning to form to talk about Alice Cooper albums. We are now to Lace and Whiskey. This is the third of the Alice Cooper solo works after the band kind of parted ways. Timing-wise, this came out in 1977. This was the same year that most of the remaining part of the band formed a group called Billion Dollar Babies and released Battle-Axe this same year. So both Lace and Whiskey and Battle-Axe, two very different efforts, came out in 1977.
Now, do you think, being the completist that we are here, that at some point we should maybe do a review of the Battle-Axe album?
I think so. I think we plow our way through the main Cooper catalog, and then I think what we've decided, we've kind of talked about it a few times, for the live albums, since those may not, some of them, certainly the one that's coming up next, the Alice Cooper show, doesn't warrant a whole show, that we may just do a single show and talk about all the various live albums that Alice has released. There's at least 3 that I know of. And then I think Battle-Axe would be a very interesting conversation. And I have that on vinyl.
Oh, interesting. I have heard it before, but I have not listened to it in years. And I don't know that I ever really sat down and gave it its just due. So I would like to do that. Just doing the show is going to give me a good excuse to really delve into that album deeper than I have.
Cool. Yeah, I think we can. We'll tack that on to as we do some of the bonus post catalog work, the live albums, and then maybe Battle-Axe, and maybe we'll do a show on the box set. We've got plenty of more Alice content coming up, kids. But I will be album Sherpa for this one. So before we start kind of working through the tracks, general takeaways for Lace and Whiskey, Mike. What are your thoughts?
All right, so before we get started on this one, as the squatties know, I don't normally prepare for this show. I know it's hard to believe that most of this is just off the cuff, but for these Alice episodes, I actually do prepare, in the sense that I will look up some interesting stuff about the recording of the albums, and I'll always re-listen to the album at least once or twice all the way through, and then, pick apart my favorite songs and ignore the ones I don't like. I really came to a conclusion today, because going into this one, I'm going to say right from the start, not a favorite. It's not vying for those top spots for me. It's not even going to come close. It's going to be another one of those, hey, do I like it better than this record kind of thing? But I really came to a realization that I'm not going to say it completely changed my thinking on this record, but it did change my thinking on how I'm going to approach the list from this point forward. I've been judging, because like you said, this is the third Alice solo record, and I think I was a little bit harsh on Welcome to My Nightmare and Goes to Hell, because I really compared every track to the Alice Cooper group records. And I'm forgetting that these are solo. Because of the name, I'm forgetting that these are solo records. And I just had an argument with somebody earlier. We were talking about different bands and how, if a band has a substantial amount of lineup changes, for example, if there's, one remaining member from the classic lineup or original lineup of the band, are they then just a solo project? And I said no, because in those instances, they're continuing on the sound of that band, even if it's just different members. So that's kind of the way that I've been looking at this, when that's really wrong. These are solo records. So I have been approaching these records in the wrong way. I'm comparing them to the Alice Cooper group records when I should be taking them as Alice solo records. So that made me reevaluate my entire list, and I'm going to drop a big bombshell here on everybody right from the start. I was completely right up until this point. Even reevaluating them, my opinions on them were completely accurate, and I still don't like this record that much.
I thought you
No,
were going to say you came to your senses and made $1 Billion Babies the number one, but I guess not.
no, never. But
Okay.
what about you, Kelly?
This one was tough for me to decide on in terms of. So I would agree with your characterization that not a favorite. Matter of fact, when I kind of look across, say, yeah, let me go. If I'm kind of pulling through the music player and saying, oh, let me go to the Alice Cooper section, I pretty quickly, if I'm picking an album to listen to, I pretty quickly skip over Lace and Whiskey. There's a track or two, and we'll talk about them, that are pretty darn enjoyable, I think. But it's just, there's a lot of things that bother me. This was kind of my sequence of buying Alice Cooper albums. Welcome to My Nightmare was the first Alice album I bought. From the Inside was the second. Then Killer, Love It to Death, and then Lace and Whiskey. And it was the first Alice Cooper album purchase I had ever made where there was almost a little regret. It was like, wow, I'm just not as excited. Every other one had so much magic in it one way or another. It was so cool. And this one, there were just places where I wasn't really sure what was going on because they've started the concept thing. It got tighter and tighter with Schools Out and $1 Billion Baby, certainly with Welcome to My Nightmare and Goes to Hell. And so we go into this album where Alice eschews all kind of previous sinister Alice, and now he's Maurice Escargot, a private detective in the spirit of Peter Sello's Inspector Clouseau. And so it's kind of a gumshoe 40s, 50s detective movie, TV, golden age of cinema kind of vibe, I guess. But I don't really know what the unifying element of this album is. And maybe it doesn't need to have one, but it seemed like there was supposed to be one, and I kept looking for it, and I really couldn't find it.
Yeah, no, it does kind of feel, because I was reading a lot about the backstory and the plans for the tour that were associated with this, and of course the live album that in chronology comes next came from that tour and things like that, and the Maurice Escargot character, which is a terrible name, because I wish that wasn't the character's name, but this really doesn't feel like Welcome to My Nightmare and Goes to Hell, which there was a clear through line with them. And it's so strange because this seems on paper like it has a far more developed story that is just not there in the actual album.
Nope, and I think that will come further to light as we make our way through the album. So let's start off with.
Well, before we get started,
okay.
can I just throw something at you really quick, because you said something that made me think of something. So one of your previous recommendations was for the Alice Cooper documentary that was made by Banger Films, and I was actually watching. If you watch their YouTube channel, they do a music debate show on there called Lock Horns, and on there they were talking about how a person's entry point into a certain band, a lot of times that album, even if it's not a classic album, will kind of become one of their favorite albums just because of their own personal history with it. So you actually just said that your first Alice album was Welcome to My Nightmare.
Yes.
See, I didn't know that. So that's interesting to me because that is not particularly high on your list.
Yeah. But my second Alice Cooper album will do better, which was From the Inside. So spoiler coming up from there. But yeah, but everything's relative as you go through the body of work. I really like Welcome to My Nightmare, but it's not a better album than Killer or Love It to Death.
So I think for all the squatties, the takeaway from that is obviously everything Kelly and I are saying is right because we're capable of being objective. Okay, I'm sorry, you can go.
I think that's an important note for everybody to keep track of. So you buy your album. It's got a cover with a revolver and a garter belt and a Lace and Whiskey paperback written by Alice Cooper. And on the back cover, you got Alice dressed like a 1940s detective with the hat and cigarette hanging out the corner of his mouth. And so then we get into the musical, and it opens up with It's Hot Tonight. How is that for an opening track for you, Mike?
It's not a great song, and it's not super memorable, but it is one of my favorites on this record because it's one of the few that's kind of, I would say that this record, unlike Goes to Hell, is more rock and roll, at least, even if it's not the Detroit rock that I want it to be. It is a little more rock and roll, and this is definitely a rock song. So it's a good start for me for the album.
Yeah, and I think I'm not gonna debate you right now, but as we get a little deeper into, basically for the first three songs, I'm with you 100%, and really as I went through re-listened to it, these first three songs, I'm like, maybe I've kind of not given Lace and Whiskey whiskey it's due. And then I got to the rest of the song. I said, no, I was pretty much right on it. But
well, and that's the thing. Yeah, Lace and Whiskey is one of those records that for me, Alice has such a big catalog. It's an album that I, just like all of them, listen to at least once all the way through. I've definitely never, prior to this, never listened to it from start to finish as one piece of music again since the first time I heard it years ago. And listening to it again, like you said, the first 3 tracks are solid rock songs. I mean, they're not, I don't want to make it sound like they're bad. I'm just saying they're not Billion Dollar Babies. They're not anything that would go in the top echelon of our list, like Love It to Death or Billion Dollar Babies or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying that these are. But they're solid rock and roll songs, which we really didn't get much of on Goes to Hell.
Yeah, and it seemed like he's coming back with a vengeance on these first 3. So I like It's Hot Tonight. I kind of agree with you. It's not like a amazing song, but it's very, very solid. It's great, as we say about it every time we talk about it. Live takes a whole nother life of itself. He's opened shows with It's Hot Tonight. It's a pretty cool way to get going on an Alice show. So live, it's really strong. It's got a good kind of guitar hook riff going there. Right out of the get-go. Good strong start, good rock and roll. So you're cooking, going, okay, and then you roll into Lace and Whiskey, which also is up-tempo. I will be including Alice performed Lace and Whiskey on the Johnny Carson show, and I'll be including that video in our blog post, and I highly recommend folks watching it. But what do you think of Lace and Whiskey?
Well, we kind of already bled into this a little bit talking about It's Hot Tonight, but these first 3 songs for me are better than I remember the overall album being, which I really don't want to, too strongly recommend it right out of the gate or anything like that. Cause again, not much of a spoiler at this point. This is not placing really high on my list, and it'll probably get pushed down even further as we go along. But these first 3 songs are pretty solid rock and roll songs.
Yep. And the third, since we're kind of grouping them, we'll just kind of throw that third one in. Road Rats. Of the 3, probably my favorite of the 3, and I thought all 3 of these were solid. Have you ever seen the movie Roadie starring Meatloaf?
I actually saw part of it. I haven't seen the whole movie.
Well, Alice makes a cameo in Roadie. Roadie is about, shockingly enough, a roadie. Meatloaf's a roadie who can fix anything, and Alice is on tour and having problems, and so he goes to help him. And actually, there's a groupie who wants, her big goal is who's kind of Meatloaf's love interest in this movie. Her big goal is to hook up with Alice Cooper. So he's kind of in Roadie, with her by name quite a bit, in terms of appearance, not so much. But Road Rats is featured heavily in Roadie, and that version is a different version than this one, and a better version, actually. But this is I really do like Road Rats. It's a fun song. And some lyrics, Alice is a really clever lyricist. There are some times when I didn't kind of fully capture what some of the lyrics were, and I was kind of researching prior to the show this one, because there's always a section that I never really understood what it was. But in Road Rats, when they're talking about the Road Rats, they say, we're the men behind the band, we're the Backbone Muscle Clan. So I thought Backbone Muscle Clan is a great band name. Could have been a good name for this podcast if we didn't pick Squat Cobbler. but Road Rats is not. These are all 3 really solid songs, with Road Rats of the 3 being my favorite.
Yeah, I have to 100% agree with you there. Again, this is right out of the gate. This is a solid opening to the album. None of these 3 for me are like classics. I think, speaking just for myself, if I were to make up, and maybe we should do this, and I think we might have touched on this before, maybe when all this is done, we should both come up with a list of like the Kelly and the Mike Alice Cooper Essentials playlist.
I think that'd be good.
And none of these songs would be on my playlist.
There's one long shot, which we'll come to, but it's a long shot, and we haven't talked about it yet. I do like Road Rats quite a bit, though.
I like Road Rats a lot. I mean, maybe as we talk them out, but right now it's probably, I'm going to say, my favorite on the album.
Yep, I think it is my favorite, but there's another song it's got a kind of a special place in my heart. We'll talk about shortly. But so you get the album, you start going through, you get these 3 boom, 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 solid, pretty much sounds like Alice Cooper. Storyline wise, you could kind of go, okay, it's hot, and then Lace and Whiskey kind of sets the whole detective gumshoe thing. But then all of a sudden you got Roadies, so the things start to unravel a little bit. And then all hell breaks loose, because now we go into Damned If You Do, which is kind of a rockabilly song, I guess. Any thoughts on Damned If You Do?
Yeah, we're starting to lose me here. he hooked me with the first three. This is where he kind of starts to lose me on this record.
This is where I cocked my head a little bit and said, I've really loved all the rest of his stuff, and this is, and again, it's not like a horrible song, but it's not Alice at all. No snarl, no growl, no sinister stuff. This is actually, the whole album was written by Alice, Dick Wagner, and Bob Ezrin. The next song is actually just a Wagner Cooper one. Any of the ballads at this time frame were Wagner and Alice, but this is rockabilly. It just doesn't sound really like Alice. For what it is, it's a nice execution of a song like it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just, and it doesn't have any really storyline to it, and it's just, it's just kind of there.
Well, speaking of storyline, I really think, again, we're 4 songs. We're almost done the first side of the album. And while there has been sort of hints at noir, detective-ish themes, there is no storyline to speak of so far.
Nope. And it's not coming. We can think, maybe there's going to be a second half recovery. No.
And again, you can take pieces of Lace and Whiskey and It's Hot Tonight and pull out sort of tropes of that type of stuff, but there's no story in the way that we saw with Welcome to Nightmare and even with Goes to Hell.
So 3 rock and roll songs, then we get kind of this rockabilly head scratcher, and then we go into You and Me, which is, so this is now the third. Alice in his solo career has put a ballad, each of which had done fairly well on the radio. Actually, this one tracked the highest of all of them. So you had Only Women Bleed, I Never Cry, and now in this album you have You and Me. It's the one that actually tracked the highest. It is adult contemporary rock ballad kind of. I mean, it's a good ballad, but again, nothing for the storyline, and definitely not Alice to me. Where I Never Cry is a ballad, but you can tell that's a ballad by Alice Cooper.
Yeah, I like I Never Cry. This is an attempt at doing kind of the same thing that just doesn't have the Alice in it. Like you said, like it just feels like every other song that would have been on the radio at that time.
And so on the first side, we had Alice, and he started to slip away, and he slipped a little bit further away, and then we go to the side 2, and he comes back for one song, but then he's gone. After the song, he's gone for the rest of the album, in my opinion. Side 2, King of the Silver Screen. I have multiple things to say about King of the Silver Screen, but I don't want to taint your assessment, so I would like to hear your candid evaluation of King of the Silver Screen.
In some ways, this is the most Alice song on the record. Not in the sense of it being, it's still not back to that snarly, driving Detroit rock of the early records, but personality-wise, this is the Alice personality that we love. You?
Agree wholeheartedly. The humor, because there's always a little bit of this kind of twisted humor that runs through some of his best stuff, whether it's Unfinished Sweet, Raped and Freezing, all sorts of other goodies that are out there. Even Yeah to a degree, but this has got humor in it. It has a nice kind of power lope with the guitars in terms of the core part, but it's kind of a mixed bag because while you've got a decent drive to it, it's not a love it to death kind of drive, but it's still got a nice drive to it. But then in the midst of it, you get kind of the movie standard someone sneaking up on you sound, the dun 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 dun. That's in there, and My Eyes Have Seen the Glory makes a musical appearance a couple times in this song as well, which are a bit of a surprise. But for those of you who have not heard King of Silver Screen, it's basically about Alice being a construction worker, but he goes home at night and dreams about being a movie star. And early in the song, he dreams about being Valentino and Errol Flynn. And then as we get towards the end, he goes, or I could have been Greta Garbo, and takes a little turn at the end on there. And there's a really funny section at the end where he's no longer singing, but he's just basically shouting and yelling at people. That's, I think, really, really funny. It is a really clever song and a fun song. It's got some rock to it. It's got some humor to it. And it's definitely Alice, without a doubt.
Yeah, this is without question, if nothing else in personality, this is the classic Alice that we love. And
that's where, for me, between Road Rats and this song, for my favorite song on there, this gets kind of a little over the top and on the nose in some of the attempts at humor there, which is where Road Rats is a straight rock execution. So I might lean towards saying Road Rats is my favorite, but I really do like King of the Silver Screen. And if I was doing a playlist just to kind of mix things up, it would it would be under consideration. I don't know. There's a lot of good songs out there likely bump it off, but it would at least it'd be in the conversation for the final list because it's just and most people haven't heard it because they don't make it that far through the album usually.
All right, so since we're kind of floating this idea as we work through this album, the Squatties, how many songs do you think we should give ourselves? Because now, we're what, 10 albums in?
Yep, this will be this
overall.
Yep, this is the 10th.
Yeah, so this is the 10th album. Maybe now it's time to start thinking, well, how many songs would be on our essential Alice playlists?
15? Does that sound about right?
15? That works for me.
That's I originally was going to go 10, but it's like, wow, to come 10 would be tough. 15 is not going to necessarily be easy, but that's going to be kind of fun to do because I originally go, oh yeah, I know this song's going to be on this, but then it's like, well, you got this and this and this, and I may just say Special Forces. We'll just do Special.
How many tracks are on Special Forces?
See, look at you over there ripping the sawdust out of my teddy bear is listed as a track on Special Forces, but we actually never made it to the pressing. So I believe it shows 11, but there are only 10 songs on Special Forces, something like that. We'll check the math on that. But yeah, let's go 15 for the playlist, and then we'll have to decide. I assume we probably need to make our way all the way through the catalog before we share with everybody.
Yeah, I think this is something to cap off the Cooper albums.
That'll be good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That'll be interesting to see how much overlap we have.
That I think is going to be really interesting because I do think while we are going to really diverge on a few albums here, I think the top and bottom of our list is going to kind of look similar as far as the albums go. I could see huge differences though in the playlist.
I think so. Because there will be Special Forces representation on my playlist. And there may not be on yours.
And I'm going heavy into Raise Your Fist and Yell.
You could have all of those. They are completely all yours.
Deep cuts.
And so we got King of the Silver Screen, we got Alice, it's got some rock and it's fun. And then this is where the album began to disappoint me because we have 4 more songs left. We've just gone through the first track on the second side of the album. And I am hard pressed on any of the remaining songs to have much good to say about any of them. Maybe one. So we'll see. So we go into Bang Stomp, which is actually a cover written by Charles Underwood. And it's, again, kind of a 50s rock thing. I don't know why it's there. It's not even a good song. I don't think. It's always been one of the more irritating parts to me on this album is that if you're going to cover something that's good. I don't think this is a particularly good song. Alice executes it just fine, but I don't really care for it.
I don't know that I 100% agree on the cover something that's good because I feel like we've already seen Alice take songs that we would have otherwise not enjoyed and turn them into something we love.
Fair enough. Cover something good or cover something and make it good.
Right. And neither one of those were hit here. And you hit on something that I really strongly feel too, which is so far this has been a fairly solid album. I mean, there was a little hiccup with Damned If I Do, but this is really the point where you flip the vinyl over, play that song, and turn it off. Play King of the Silver Screen, and you don't really need to know about the last 4.
Nope, and you keep hoping there's going to be a comeback. There's not real, for me, there really isn't.
No, no. King of the Silver Screen, which again, not a great song, not a classic song, but it brought back the Alice personality. It's a pretty cool way to kick off the second half of the record. For the vinyl fans who are flipping it over to the other side, it's a good way to start off because that's something that we've talked about before where for me, continuity is a huge part of this. And especially when you're thinking about vinyl, you have a first and last track twice that you're dealing with. And that was a solid way to start side 2, and then side 2 just never gets back there.
No, and I would argue anybody could have recorded these next 4 songs because there's nothing distinctively Alice Cooper about any of these remaining songs, and the performance on these, and the music on it's just it's closer to Godspell or Jesus Christ Superstar than Alice Cooper from here on out. It's just I don't know. I just don't know what happens here, but it goes into so all of a sudden we get this strange kind of 50s song shows up out of nowhere, I guess maybe still kind of tying back to the detective thing. I don't know. But then we go into if we're willing to just kind of ignore the songs on the first 2 albums, and I think we've agreed that's a good thing to do, I can say with great confidence the next song is my least favorite Alice Cooper song of all time. No More Love at Your Convenience.
Yeah, excluding the first 2 albums, this is probably the worst it gets. When I re-listen to it, I remember it as like a disco song, and then re-listening to it, I remember it now, or will remember it now, as like a knockoff ABBA song, specifically.
There you go. I couldn't figure out what the vibe was on it. It's where I said kind of Godspell or Jesus Christ Superstar. I was trying to find a thing, but ABBA, this is an ABBA song.
It really is. It sounds like a weird, like a B-side of theirs.
And this was actually released as a single.
Yeah.
The two singles off of this album were You and Me and No More. He shot a video for this.
I like how you're saying that in disbelief. Like, no, people, if you haven't heard Lace and Whiskey, when you get to this song, you are going to think we're kidding you. But there was a video shot for this.
I don't think I am going to. I just can't bring myself to include that in the blog post. I'll do the Lace and Whiskey one because it's pretty fun, but it's really fun. This no, absolutely not. I loathe this song. It just makes no sense to me. And then we move into I Never Wrote Those Songs, which I think Alice is expressing regret for what just happened, and he's trying to deny it immediately. This isn't bad. It's softer in register overall as for me. As a song, not so bad, but the big problem is as it kind of finishes in the lyrics, it typically ends at the end of kind of each of the stanzas. He goes, and I swear to you, I never wrote those songs. And then on the last set of lyrics, he goes, and I swear to you, I never. And he stops, and there's a big long silence. And if they had cut the song right there, I'd have probably been thinking a lot more of the song. But then they tack on a saxophone. Ambient, I don't know what to describe it. It's just totally unnecessary kind of additional musical interlude at the end of the song that they missed their opportunity to just finish it right after that. Never in the silence. Been a pretty cool way to finish the song, but nope, we got to play some saxophone for you.
Yeah, I agree with that. The song should have stopped earlier, excluding the end, the saxophone and stuff, which I'll say something else about in a second. This isn't a bad song necessarily, but it is a forgettable song. And to be honest, sometimes I don't know which is worse. Like, I'm not sure if it's worse to really hate a song because it sounds like ABBA or something like that, or if it's more of an insult to say you just kind of forgot about a song. Like, it just left no lasting impact on you whatsoever. And for the most part, that's what we get out of these final two tracks for me. That last little section to me is just indicative of the overproduction on this. At the attempt at making sort of a radio record. And I mean, it's weird because, again, like putting saxophone on there, maybe you could say that's a playback into the detective thing, but it never really got there other than some like vague movie or detective-esque references, particularly on the first side. I wouldn't have known. You can listen to Welcome to My Nightmare and hear the character Steven's name. I wouldn't know the detective escargot character if I didn't read it.
Yeah, I agree. This is, in a lot of ways, this is a pretty decent song, and then they take it over the top at the end, and it's like, and we're Steely Dan now, and it's like, you shouldn't be Steely Dan. You should be Alice Cooper.
It's weird though, because like it's overproduced, but at the same time not overproduced in the way of like, because you could argue that Welcome to My Nightmare and Goes to Hell are both overproduced, but they're also more definitively concept records, which by and large tend to be overproduced. Like, you're going for that big showy kind of thing, so it kind of fits with it. Whereas like this, the concept never really materializes, so it's just big for the sake of nothing.
As I was kind of reading through various reviews of this album and the albums around, it was interesting because there was a selection of them that said, well, Goes to Hell wasn't that strong, and this was a little bit stronger than that. And I'm like, really? How could you possibly say that? But they used overindulgent, overproduced, and language appeared in many of the reviews. And it was probably $1 Billion Babies was excessive, but it made no bones about the fact that it was about excess, and that was the whole point of it. And
that's the thing, and that was where our mild debate about what was better, Love It to Death or $1 Billion Babies. I get the over the top nature. Like, I love It to Death, and I like it better than $1 Billion Babies because it's a little more wild and unrestrained and stripped down. But the strength of $1 Billion Babies is that it's big and gaudy and overproduced at times because, again, it's it's talking about the excess of being in a rock group. Like, and you have to show the excess to really get there. This isn't talking about anything.
No.
Like there's a vague storyline that is basically created by the record sleeve, not by anything in the album.
Yeah, and you just try and find ways to hang little pieces off of it one way or another. And then if the album wraps up with My God, which opens up with church organ moments in this song. There's parts of this song that are, nice little moments in it. It's a big number, a little more heavy on the delivery. To me, though, what I've always argued is that Alice is a remarkable lyricist, and what he weaves into songs a lot of times is just brilliant. But I don't get that much on the second side, and I certainly don't get it on this song. That it's a song that's got some nice moments to it. I mean, I don't actually kind of like mind listening to it based on everything else that's on this side. It's the second strongest track on this side, but it's just kind of there in terms of I'm not really sure what the point of the song is in any way, shape, manner, or form. But it's not a bad song in general. It's decent to listen to, but again, just does nothing to knit this thing together, drive anything home, and it just finishes it off. And while it's not Abba, it sounds like maybe Abba's opening act. This might be one of their songs. I don't know.
Yeah, again, we're back to, is it bad? No, but it's forgettable, and that might be worse. I think you can make a solid argument that forgettable is almost worse than bad, especially for an artist like Alice Cooper, who is into the theatricality and the showmanship of his music. I think forgettable might be more of an insult than a bad song.
I think you're right. Yeah, and I'd be hard pressed to quote outside of My God any lyrics from the song.
Exactly, and that's kind of the way I feel about this album as a whole. Although I will say, it fared, upon re-listening for this show, it fared better than I expected it to. Only because the first side is stronger than I remember it.
Basically, the same here is that this is definitely not a favorite album of mine, and I knew about where it was going to end up on the list. But on the re-listen, I said, "Well, crap, man! If this had been an EP, if he just said, let me do those first three songs and do King of the Silver Screen,
a live track.
Maybe I never wrote that. I never wrote those songs and chopped it a little bit. It'd have been a nice little ditty, but he didn't. I knew I was not a big fan of this particular album, but then I go back and listen to it and I go, hey, those first three songs are pretty darn fun. So that's why we're talking about this guy. Is I mean, most of his stuff's all pretty great. There's just moments that some of it's a lot better than others, and this is one of those cases.
Yeah, and that's, I think, an important thing to kind of note with this entire thing is, even if we're saying that a record isn't one of our favorite records, and while we didn't enjoy the first two records, really from this point out, even the ones we kind of, don't like, we don't like them relative to the classic Alice Cooper records that we love. I would take the worst, excluding the first two, I would take the worst elements of this discography over the best parts of many more popular or current artists' catalogs.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's somewhat, everything's relative to a degree, and so there's a lot stronger work in his catalog than this particular album. But this is not a bad album, but it's just not as good as a lot of the other albums.
Right, and I would really say, aside from the first two, and again, maybe this will change because I know there's a few interesting ones coming up. Yeah, there's a few interesting spots coming up, but really, aside from the first two records, off the top of my head, I'm going to say there really isn't anything I dislike. And that's an incredible thing when you think about how many albums we're talking about here. There are very few bands that I think you could say you can pretty much delve anywhere into the discography and you're going to find something you like.
Yeah, and we're going to go through several different kind of thematics in the way some of these, the Brutal Planet, Dragontown period, the Coke years. There's some different stuff coming up. A lot of diversity coming up, but they all are really, really strong. So before we decide where we're going to rank this bad boy, we do need to pick our Pat Boone song, and clearly, No More Love at Your Convenience is. I think Pat could do an equal job to Alice on that song, and so I'm going to attack that as the Pat Boone song off of this album.
I'm going to 100% agree with you, and I'm going to up the ante a little bit on what you just said and say that he would do it better because he would fully embrace. Yeah, he would fully embrace the cheesiness and take it to full Abba territory.
Yeah, which tells you a lot about that song. The that there's a really strong chance that Pat Boone could perform it better than Alice. That kind of tells you it's not an Alice song.
Yeah. All right, it's that time.
All right. Yes, it is. Where I think as our list is getting a little larger, this will be number 10 in the list. You want to kind of maybe talk about what neighborhood it's in, and I'm gonna guess it's gonna be in your bottom 5. And just to refresh you, I think you probably know, but your bottom 5 currently are in order. So the highest of the bottom 5 for you is "Welcome to My Nightmare," followed by "Muscle of Love," "Alice Cooper Goes to Hell," "Easy Action," and "Pretties for You."
That's where you have it? Or is that where you're guessing I have it?
No, I'm guessing that you're going to place it somewhere in that bottom half, so I didn't
Well, definitely. So where are you thinking then? Where would you guess I'm going to put it?
I'm going to think you're going to put it between Hell and Easy Action.
You know what? That's what I thought coming into this, but I'm actually going to put it between Muscle of Love and Goes to Hell.
So you're going to pick the album with No More Love at Your Convenience over the album with Feeding a Diabetic a Candy Cane, just to be clear.
Yes, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to justify, as we should have to on occasion, I'm going to justify this decision that I'm making by the fact that with one minor hiccup, I like the entire first side. Whereas I can't really say that about Goes to Hell. Like, I'm skipping around the whole album. If I was going to put the vinyl on, I can pretty much listen to the entire first side of this and enjoy it. Can't do it with Goes to Hell. And it was actually talking it out that made me make that decision.
I hear you. And so we're basically in the same place again in kind of wrestling or where it falls into. I knew it was below Muscle of Love, but I just kind of came back to when we went in to talk about Goes to Hell. I did the re-listen, but I was already pretty much loaded for Goes to Hell because I knew it. For me to go into for this album, I really had to go back and take it all in because there's just big chunks of this that I completely forgot, and I didn't really forget any of Goes to Hell. So I'm going to be slightly different than you, and I am going to place it because my bottom of the list matches pretty much yours, and I'm going to have it above Easy Action, but below Goes to Hell. Close, very, very close.
And that's what I thought I was doing coming into this, and it changed as we talked it out because I started thinking of it. I'm a vinyl guy. And I started thinking of it as putting the record on. I'm skipping all over the place on Goes to Hell. I can pretty much put the first side of this on, and then the first song of side 2. The ending falls apart for me, and like I said, I think it's an excellent argument that you can make. Like, I think you made the right choice. I'm making the choice based on being a vinyl guy and being able to just put that side on and listen to it. But you could easily make the argument that the fact that parts of this record are completely forgettable is worse than being bad.
Good. All right. So a little tougher for us. We haven't had one where we've been kind of like a little not as excited, but again, to Mike's point earlier, this is all relative now, gang. These are all pretty good albums. These are all fun to listen to. Highly recommend you get them. It's about where they fit in the mix of things, and it's still fun listening. If nothing else, boys, get those first 3 tracks and listen to them because it's good, fun stuff from there. We will. So the next chronologically. The next thing that comes up, the tour to support Lace and Whiskey, it's called the King of the Silver Screen Tour, which included a giant TV that Alice would jump in and out of, and they would run fake commercials, and it was all a big production number, very, very cool. They recorded, and reading a review of it, they were quick to point out they did not cull from various live shows the best versions. Alice played the Aladdin Casino in Las Vegas for 2 nights, and they just said, "Yeah, we'll take that." So the Alice Cooper show is a very live, pretty drunk Alice doing a number of songs is the next release, his first live release. Unfortunately, the original Alice Cooper group did not do any live releases beyond, like, I've got a special edition $1 Billion Babies that is pretty much live from that tour, which is pretty great. But
and they have announced, I'm sure you've already seen this, but they did announce they're going to be doing similar reissues of the other Alice Cooper group records with basically a live version of the album as a bonus disc with each one.
Which would be fantastic. I had not heard that, which will be fantastic because the $1 Billion Babies bonus thing there, it's really, really fun to kind of because they were good live. So that's good. But we're going to probably stay with original work now. We'll come back and do a show towards the end and talk about all the live albums. We'll talk a lot about Fistful of Alice. We'll probably talk a lot about Fistful of Alice in future shows because we both love that one so much. But I think we'll just skip the Alice Cooper show for now, and we'll move to 1978 for the next release, which will be From the Inside.
It's going to be an interesting talk.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Because I kind of view Nightmare, Goes to Hell, and Lace and Whiskey as kind of a group. And
I can see that, yeah.
And then there's a shift that starts to occur with From the Inside, and there's many other shifts to come. But I don't kind of view this as I don't view From the Inside as the fourth of a series, where I kind of view these three as, hey, these are Alice's first 3 solo albums, and there's some level of connectivity. This next one kind of starts our first, our latest shift. We had the Alice Cooper group to now Alice Cooper solo, and now his solo career starts to take some different shifts. And so From the Inside will be the next Alice show we do. And on that note, I think we're going to wrap up our 20-second squat.
And there's a lot of Scooby-Doo porn in general that I didn't know existed until the last couple weeks.
You must be so proud.
I'm just proud of myself that I got through my entire recommendation without using any objectionable language.
Okay. Want to be cool like Alice Cooper, do coke.